Well, we see AMC and Cinemark shares both spiking. This on news that a judge has agreed to end what's called the Paramount Consent Decrees. These are decades-old rules preventing studios from working together and also preventing studios from owning theater chains. So this opens the door, this ruling by the judge opens the door for vertical integration. That means a movie studio could own a theater chain. It also removes rules that limited how studios negotiated with theater chains. This means now perhaps the studios could work together to set release dates together. But we see AMC Entertainment shares up 15% on this news. Cinemark shares up nearly about 4.5% on this news. Guys, back over to you.
Julia, this is so exciting in a way because we're talking about the complete remaking of an industry that's been decimated by the pandemic. Do we know if the pandemic factored into this decision? Because the market shares, that might have once argued against this now don't make that argument anymore. And then I want to come back to what you said about the studios working together. But first of all, is there a COVID impact here?
Well, I would say, Kelly, this has been in the works for a very long time. DOJ antitrust chief Macon Delorme took steps towards this months ago. So the steps towards removing the Paramount consent decrees definitely predated the pandemic. I think the impetus here was the idea that studios and theater chains aren't just working together and competing against each other anymore because there's so much competition on the streaming space. Right. So when you are in a world where studios and theaters are all competing against streaming, there's no longer the need to have all of these rules limiting how studios and theaters negotiate with each other and what the potential is there, because the whole world is their competition right now.
It still is kind of a major bailout for the theaters right now. You see AMC shares are up 17%, Cinemark is up 5%. What kind of deal making could this open us up to?
Well, I think the real question, Kelly, is are those stocks up because this is the potential for them to be purchased, for there to be a deal, an acquisition by the likes of a Netflix or one of the movie studios? I mean, right now there are so many questions about the future of movie going that is unclear who might want to make that kind of investment. But I think we might be seeing a move higher partially for that reason.
Interestingly,
so a lot of unknowns still for the movie industry. But the question is, like, would a Netflix, which owns a couple of theaters, Netflix owns theaters in Los Angeles and New York, would they maybe want to own a slightly larger theater chain so they could do whatever they wanted in terms of releasing films on streaming and in their theaters at the same time?
Sure, and we see Netflix shares at session lows down 4%. IMAX is up 4%. But on the Netflix point, I wonder if investors are a little skittish about competition. If this says, for example, NBC Universal and Peacock could now be partnering with a theater chain and kind of do something innovative there to rival Netflix, if they're kind of thinking, down the line that way.
Well, we've definitely seen COVID drive a closing of those windows. There used to be a set window between when theaters released movies and then when movies were available on streaming. We already saw Universal take the lead in closing that. And I think that there's definitely going to be a standard now of a much smaller window. The question is, what would happen if a studio owned a theater chain? That window would probably disappear entirely.
And real quickly to your final point about how this might allow studios to work together on release dates, what exactly does that mean?
Well, it's a little complicated. I mean, there are these practices like block booking and circuit dealing, the processes of how films are booked with theaters, as opposed to licensing, films on a one-off basis. So I think right now, my understanding is that studios have to be really careful not to seem like they're working together when they're setting release dates. And I think that the removal of the Paramount consent decrees just opens the field a little bit more now that it's clear that the competition is really in streaming and not within the industry itself.
Yeah.